Hello, everybody. Welcome back to OneSoccer Today. It's Adam Jenkins, Joshua Cloak, Gareth Wheeler, and Oliver Platt with you on this, depending on where you are, very snowy and icy Wednesday morning, hence the change of setup for yours truly. But it's great to be with you for this morning taping. We have so much to get to today, and because we're taping in the morning, we're not going to have time to give the Arnold Clark Cup the attention it deserves. So tomorrow, have no fear, we'll have a full, thorough breakdown of that. But gentlemen, we have to start with an important story, a big story, and an unfortunate story if you are a fan of Canadian soccer, and that is Jonathan David's Lille side falling 2-0 to Chelsea in the first leg of the UEFA Champions League. Look, I know a lot of Canadian supporters were hoping we would see some Bayern Munich circa 2020 narrative there at the end of the match, but Jonathan David largely ineffective in a game where Chelsea was absolutely dominant. And Wheels, look, there's been some speculation that David could make an off-season move to the Premier League. Does a performance like that help his chances or hurt his chances or have no effect?
Two things here. One, I didn't know that you lived inside the Big O, where you had to actually change your location when it snows outside. Two, you just positioned that like Lille died, like the club just went to the perished. There's still a second leg and they're playing at home, so it can be a little bit upbeat. It's not that unfortunate or downtrodden. It was a difficult game, and it's a good learning experience for a player like Jonathan David if he aspires to, play in a more competitive league in the future. That the three Chelsea center backs of Thiago Silva, Rudiger, and Christensen, like, they're excellent. These are well-established, very good center backs who are in their prime, and in Silva's case, beyond that now. But it's going to take a little bit more. And the thing is, there's been a lot of talk about strikers this week, with Lukaku having 7 touches in a recent game. Like, if you're a forward or if you're a striker like Jonathan David, it's not just what you do, it's what the team around you does as well. So look, there'll be better days. There might even be a better second leg. It's only 2-0. We've seen other ties, go in a different direction. The away goal rules not in play in the European Champions League. So let's see. But overall, these are the nights where he will grow, he will develop from it, and doesn't make me worry about him whatsoever.
Yeah, I think you're right, Wheels. Sorry, Ollie. One thing that I noticed is Chelsea did a really good job of swarming Jonathan David, which I suppose is kind of a sign of respect of how far he's come as a player. But, we talk about all the attributes of the player. I think that elusiveness is something that's still missing, and that's something that I saw against Lille. And look, this is probably why, people like John Herdman want to see Jonathan David move on to a much bigger club so he can have that exposure to different and maybe more improved coaching methods, so he can become kind of more tactically astute, right? So he can learn to kind of get in behind of really difficult, center backs. So I think like you said, this is just a really great learning experience for the player, but it's also probably a sign, and I know, Jenkins, you kind of asked about this, it's probably a sign that he does need to move on and get more coaching so he can kind of understand how to be elusive and kind of add that to his toolbox, right?
Yeah, that was my biggest takeaway, was like, at this point, I think he needs a better coach. I think he needs better teammates, a better supporting cast, and that's how he takes his game forward from here on in. Because I thought, Renato Sanchez, David, they were the two players who looked like they could make something happen for Lille. But the rest of the team around them just wasn't of the quality to beat a team like Chelsea. So in terms of his future prospects and moving on, like, if there's any team out there that is changing their mind based on one performance, then it's probably a blessing in disguise for him, to be honest, because they're not a very smart team if that's the approach they're taking. And others might be a little bit relieved that he's not just added another 20 million to his value, right? So I don't think it will hurt him in the long term.
I guess it depends on who you ask. Who's signing the checks in that situation? Well, it was leg one, Wheels. You're right. I shouldn't paint the picture of all doom and gloom. But there was a player from the CONCACAF region who did affect this game in a very positive way, and that was, of course, Christian Pulisic scoring that second goal. There's been a lot of talk, and maybe even some from your friends at OneSoccer, about Christian Pulisic in recent vintage and who are the best players in CONCACAF. Is there any doubt in your mind that Christian Pulisic is the second best player in CONCACAF after Alphonso Davies, Josh?
No, not for me. I think all things being equal, I mean, I want players on my team, and if we're talking about, the biggest players, I want players that have won big trophies and have delivered kind of in those big moments, and then can kind of bring that experience, to their national team, to the next team that they have. And that's what Christian Pulisic has done. And I know he takes a lot of stick, in the United States, and I know he comes under fire more than any other player, and probably unfairly at times, but I guess that's just the state of where things are with that program. But I just think Christian Pulisic still has the ability to break a game wide open, and he's shown that he can, be part of these championship teams. So that's why he has the edge for me. I do think if we're kind of thinking big picture, Jonathan David maybe has the higher ceiling as the player, but he's still so young. But right now, Pulisic has the edge for me.
Ollie, what do you think?
I just think we swing back and forth too much on this kind of stuff. I think he's in the conversation for the second best player for sure. I think he's probably without a doubt in the top 5. I don't think you can make much argument about that. But he was the same last week, right? I haven't changed my mind on that because of the performance yesterday. And I think people have got to watch the games and see that one of the big reasons Pulisic was able to be successful in that game and David wasn't was because of the way the game unfolded. Lille decided to press surprisingly high and they were very aggressive, and that created tons of space for Christian Pulisic to play in. And that's where he thrives, right? When he's able to play in transition into all that space behind the press. And he's always going to be successful in games like that. That's nothing new. So I just think we constantly go back and forth on these things. He's a really, really good player. Don't get me wrong. But I don't think he's massively advanced his case because of that one individual performance.
I like the goal, and the way that Chelsea played actually suited him with Havertz playing up top, creating a lot more space, a lot more mobile as well. So I'm kind of with you, and Ollie, but I'm kind of with Josh as well. There's nothing that's changed my mind on this. This is a very good player that's relied upon far too much when it comes to the U.S. men's national team. But I just look at what this means for the U.S. men's national team right now, because Pulisic is going to be absolutely critical for this team in this final World Cup qualifying window. This is a group that lost Weston McKennie, who I would actually argue McKennie's more important for the U.S. men's national team than Alphonso Davies is for Canada. That's because Canada is able to play in different ways and are less reliant on individual players. It's really the system, the group of players that takes this team forward. Take McKennie out of that midfield, what are you left with? They play Mexico first, then they play Panama and Costa Rica, all teams in the mix for a top 4 spot. There's going to be some nervous people within the U.S. camp. And if Pulisic comes out and actually has some dominant performances in this final World Cup qualifying window, then I think that his case is maybe made a little bit more. But there's going to be even more pressure on a player who's already admitted that he's already feeling it and already tried to do too much. So the McKennie story this week is a bigger one for me than the Pulisic.
Absolutely. Well, Ollie, I know you're not a fan of swings. I don't know if that includes rope swings or just a swing set, but you just like to stay firm in your opinion. And earlier in the show, you addressed the fact that the leg one performance doesn't influence the fact that you believe Jonathan David needs to move on. But do you think that Lille's regression, considering where they were last year to where they are now, and look, they're still in the UEFA Champions League, mind you, but has this just proved your point that Jonathan David's transfer is all but guaranteed from Lille?
Yeah, I think so. I just don't think there's much left for him there in terms of, again, the quality of players he's playing with and how they're allowing him to grow his game. There's only so much you can do as an individual. And this little team last season, they had an incredible year, right? They just got eked out every possible thing they could out of that squad. And Christophe Galtier, the coach, was a massive part of that. He's probably the best coach in France, in my opinion. And now he's gone to Nice and they're up to 3rd in the league from mid-table last season. So that speaks for itself. This year, it was always likely going to be a bit of a step backwards. Yilmaz and Yazici were 2 players who scored double-digit goals last season. Now Yilmaz doesn't get in the team and Yazici's out on loan. There was always going to be regression, I think, with Lille. It was hard to believe that they were going to repeat anything close to what they did last season. And now Jonathan David is a player who, you look at his goal-scoring record in Ligue 1, you look at what he's doing for Canada, he belongs at a top team playing in the Champions League, and that's not going to be Lille next season. So I think that move has to happen, both in terms of the player, wanting to be at the highest level and fulfill his ambitions, but also just for his own personal growth and progression from this point.
They lost their manager, Christophe Galtier, who's an excellent manager. They lost their goalkeeper. They lost their left back. They lost 2 midfielders. This team has undergone far too much change, and they're in sell mode. To Ollie's point, there's no doubt he will move on, but I don't think it has anything to do with his form. It has to do what type of club that Lille is and what their books tell them right now. and they need to cash in on this player. And they have to hope that he has a good run in to close out the season, because oftentimes that last memory is the lasting one, right? So we'll see where things end up.
And Wills, it's an important point to make there, and that takes us to where I want to ask you next. Obviously, domestic is not going nearly as well as it did last year, but he has been incredible in World Cup qualifying. Even when he's had his matches where he's not scoring goals, he's still positive. He's still drawing the attention of the defenders. So does the success in CONCACAF World Cup qualifying, now he's done with Canada, help sort of boost that, even though Lille's wavering a bit this year?
It doesn't hurt, but it should just be said that the international game is so much different than the domestic game or club football. Like the way that players are used, their motivation, the setups, the teams that they play in, like it's much more difficult and arduous in terms of the competition that he faces on a weekly basis playing his club football than playing international football. The standard just isn't that good, and it shouldn't be expected to, based on the fact that these players come in for camps for 2 weeks, then they're off, and then we'll see you later in a couple months from now. Just the nature of the international game. If we were just simply judging the way that Canada would play, then Alistair Johnston wouldn't be in Major League Soccer this year. He'd be somewhere in Europe, and there'd be other Canadian players who'd probably be in line for some significant moves right now. So I don't think that it factors in or it matters that much.
Yeah, just to add very quickly, sorry, I don't know how much his play in the qualifying campaign matters as much as just Canada qualifying for the World Cup. I think that's what's really going to matter in the eyes of a team that wants to buy him, because look, we kind of saw this with Lorenzo Insigne, and it's a little bit of apples and oranges, but I think Toronto FC really liked the idea that there could be a player playing for a big team at the World Cup, and Toronto FC's name is going to be dropped, kind of alongside that player.
Too bad Italy's not going to qualify, right? So,
well, I'm not going to go down that road just yet, but I do think that's what ultimately matters.
I will.
Is the idea that well, you can enrage that fan base. I'm going to enrage other ones.
No, it's just Andy Petrillo, Josh. Just Andy
yeah.
Petrillo.
That's the target audience.
I just don't think that his qualifying play matters as much as the fact that they're going to have a big player. Whoever's going to buy him is going to have a big player as a centerpiece of a team at the World Cup, and I think that's what matters more.
Josh, just so you know, to be fair, on these Wednesday shows, you only have to deal with me. So if you do enrage Andy, it's a little less harmful until you have to see her again in person, and hopefully
I have to deal with Andy kind of critiquing my pizza stuff now, which is this is dangerous. Yeah.
Look, we love our pizza talk on Wednesday with Josh. We also love our games here. And one of my personal favorite things about these games is how you guys can take it in any direction that you want, whether it's Ollie complaining about the rules that it doesn't make sense, or Wheels just taking his own interpretation. But it's an open book. You get to take it wherever you want. And Josh, because you are our guest today, we are going to give you the first word at this. How many countries, and you can take this in a CONCACAF perspective, in a FIFA perspective, have a better 1-2 punch than Jonathan David and Alphonso Davies for Canada? Think would you rank that duo in the grand scheme of things here?
Can I just say a lot? Right? I just think you know what, I love pumping the tires of these players because they're doing incredible things, and I love what it says about the growth of the game and the development of players in Canada. But I think that's one thing that's going to be very exciting about watching Canada at the World Cup, is just to see these kind of measuring stick games and see how far these duos like Alphonso Davies and Jonathan David are from some of the best kind of countries in the world. I mean, for my money, this is no surprise, I would take a duo of Kai Havertz and Joshua Kimmich any day, but that's a bit of personal allegiance. What I do think really stands out to me about this duo, talent, sure, they're probably, there's at least 10 teams that have a better 1-2 punch, but how many teams have two players that are, as young as they are on the upward trajectory that they are, and playing in a World Cup means more to these guys, to these two, than I think a lot of other players, right? A lot of these duos that we would talk about, they would have played in a World Cup. They don't have to establish the sport, amongst other sports in the country. They're not fighting to become household names the way that Jonathan David and Alphonso Davies are. So I like the story of these two a little bit more, in terms of measuring them as a 1-2 punch against other teams. But yeah, there's a lot of more talented duos throughout the world than these two.
Wheels, where do you side here?
I don't know. Like I don't even I don't even know how you measure that, considering that Alphonso Davies plays left back for his club side.
Hey, you
right?
just pick who you think is the better player. Easy. I got 13 teams, by the way.
Okay, go. You can go list off your 13 teams. Go ahead. And
You want me to list all 13?
I want to hear these too.
All right, I probably missed one or two, so there may be some missing. But France, Belgium, Portugal, England, Italy, Germany, Senegal, Spain, Argentina, Brazil, Netherlands, Serbia. That's 13, I think.
That's a lot.
So you like Weghorst and Depay more than you like David and Davies?
It was more Virgil van Dijk than Weghorst.
No, but I thought we were talking about attacking pairs here. Attacking duos.
That's two best players.
Oh, just their two best players. Because I thought we were measuring, two attacking players in combination. And that's where I think that Canada probably is ahead of a lot of those teams that you mentioned, because those two players in attack, they're not only young and exciting, they bring pace, they're game changers in playing those positions. But overall, the top two players, of course, like there's going to be many more nations, but I was looking from an attacking perspective where it's very difficult to measure. But I think that Davies and David would absolutely be top 10, pushing top 5.
Ollie, who do you have from Germany?
This is personal for Josh.
Sorry?
Kimmich and Müller.
Okay.
You could pick, you could have Sane, you could have...
Now we can move on.
Yeah, Clay just needed that German name drop.
You could pick some players under the age of 30 if you want.
Oh, boy. And on that note, let's talk about a little Major League Soccer. The season kicks off on Saturday. All 3 Canadian teams are in action, and we try and pay attention to what Gareth Wheeler likes. And we know that Gareth Wheeler is a big fan of a show called Watch What Happens Live with Andy Cohen. So this segment is inspired by that. It's called Choose Between. I'm going to give you guys a scenario, and this is quick, gentlemen. Reminder, this is a quick rapid-fire segment. So you're going to choose between Toronto, Vancouver, and Montreal. I hope there's no questions. Gareth, show us how it's done. This is a segment inspired by you. The team that is most likely to disappoint their fan base this season.
Vancouver Whitecaps, because that's continually been the story over recent vintage. And now that the bar has been raised a little bit, the expectations for them to get back to the playoffs, I called it last year, by the way. I just don't see it happening this time around.
Ollie?
Ooh. Yeah, Vancouver, highest expectations, right? They're on a high from the end of last season. People will be wanting this team to host a playoff game, I think, this season, and they have the most potential, I think, to fall down. I think they'll make the playoffs, though.
Yeah, I hate to agree with both of these guys. That doesn't make for the most compelling
Embrace
TV.
It.
But you know what?
It's called being right.
Vancouver's just not there yet. And I also think the other two teams should have really kind of tempered expectations as well.
Okay, well, the first one out of the way so far, on the rails. That's what I like to see. Right back to Josh. The team that's going to be the most fun to watch and follow week in and week out. Doesn't mean they're going to be good. It just means they're going to be fun.
Yeah, I suppose I have to go with Toronto FC here. And I say that because there could be a lot of ugly games as well. And I think for a lot of people around Canada, Toronto FC is that team that you kind of love to hate. So I think it'll be fun one way or the other. I think it'll be chaotic at times. I think their squad is still in a state of flux. So it'll be fun. It'll be entertaining. That doesn't necessarily mean that they'll always be successful.
Gareth?
Toronto FC, because they brought the biggest name in Major League Soccer to the club. At least the countdown clock is on till July when Lorenzo Insigne will be a member of Toronto FC. So it's about keeping it on the rails and building towards something before he comes. So when he comes into this team, he can make them obviously much better than they will be to start the year. So absolutely TFC.
Ollie, unanimous?
No, at the start of the season, at least, it's got to be Vancouver. Like you look at the schedule they have coming out of the blocks. They play 6 of their first 9 on the road, and the 3 home games are New York City and Portland, the finalists, and Sporting Kansas City, who are perennially at the top of the West. So they are going to have to either prove their credentials very early on, or they're going to be struggling.
Okay, we're going to have 2 similar questions, but there's an important distinction I will explain. The team most likely to make the MLS playoffs is based on what we know and what we expect.
I think it's Vancouver again for me, just because I still think the Eastern Conference is stronger, and there's more potential for me to see TFC lose too much ground early on. Montreal could be right around that line again, I think, in or out. So I'd say Vancouver would be the most likely.
Josh?
Yeah, I think Vancouver's in. I don't know how high, but yeah, I think Vancouver's in, and I'm inclined to agree with Ollie. I think, Montreal is right there in that 6-7 range.
Wheels, your wheels down right now.
Montreal's the obvious choice. They have a familiar system. They didn't really change their team much. They've improved, bringing in Alistair Johnston. We'll see what Kamara has left. They certainly needed a goal scorer, someone up top. So I think that this move makes a whole lot of sense. They've shown the most. They have the deepest squad, I think, out of the three. So make it CF Montreal.
Okay, so this is where the question slightly. Go ahead, Ollie.
Just one thing on that. I think who's most likely to win make the playoffs versus who's most likely to win MLS Cup are two different questions. And on the latter one, I might be with Gareth on Montreal.
Now, Ollie is just trying to steal my thunder, so I might as well give the question right back to him.
Was that the question?
No, this is the question that you've already answered.
Sense.
So I'll let you elaborate. If everything comes together for a team, everything comes together, who has the highest ceiling in MLS, Ollie?
Well, that one has to be Toronto, I think, just because of Insigne, right? Like when he arrives, and if the first half of the season they can get some young players going, maybe there's a few nice surprises there. Salcedo works out in terms of anchoring that back line. Bradley bounces back, obviously, under a coach who should get the best out of him. It's Toronto who has the highest ceiling. I just don't know if they can get there this year.
Josh?
Yeah, undoubtedly it's Toronto FC, because as I said before, I don't think they're done adding, and I don't think they're done adding big names, especially kind of if we look towards the summer transfer window. I think the team that we see assembled, even though they have a lot of great young pieces that really could stand to play more, I don't think that's going to be the team that finishes the season. We know Bob Bradley likes to go big. We know Bill Manning has huge aspirations for this team. And so it's got to be Toronto FC for me.
CF Montreal, absolutely. They're the team, again, with the best structure. Mihailovic, we'll see what he can do in season number 2 in Montreal. He had 16 assists last season, basically having no one decent in front of him. Kyoto was hurt. Toy was hurt. Like, it's kind of remarkable that they were even in a playoff hunt, to be honest with you. I think this team has what it takes to go on and do something special. And look, this is a Major League Soccer. Like, what team scares you? Which side do you look at and say, wow, that team has so much talent that they're far better than anyone else? I just don't look at Major League Soccer that way right now. So CF Montreal, I think they have a real chance.
Okay, right back to Oliver for the next one. The most difficult away game when you're visiting Montreal, Toronto, or Vancouver?
I don't know that any of them are like super intense home advantage kind of environments at the minute. I think we're still waiting for one of those teams to really build the kind of dominance that we saw, from TFC in 2017 at the home stadium. For now, I'll say Vancouver. Again, I just think there's a ton of momentum behind the team right now. They've got goals in the team. They've got, probably at least the surefire or the most reliable best player in Ryan Gould, I think, coming into the season. So I'll take them.
Josh?
Vancouver. I wouldn't want to play on that turf as a visiting player.
True.
That's it. Make it a clean sweep. It's Vancouver playing on the turf. It's not fun. And it actually plays to Vancouver's strengths because they want to play a little bit chaotic. They want to play on the counterattack, use their athletes in this team and get out and run. So it definitely plays to their strengths.
Okay, we were trying to pacify the fan bases to start with some praise them. Now we're going to start picking the best, the better, and not just the clubs, but the cities. We will begin with a question on the clubs, Gareth. The team with the best 5-year forecast, not just this season, but in 5 years, who has the best forecast?
Well, Toronto FC. We heard Bill Manning mention about this project building up to the 2026 World Cup. And as of right now, of the three, they're the only city that's a lock to be hosting World Cup games come 2026. Insigne, if you're going to splash the cash on him, it cannot just stop there. There's going to be further significant investment. There has to be, right? And we'll see what that looks like. And based upon the limitations in spending in CF Montreal and Vancouver, it has to be TFC.
Ollie?
Yeah, you don't know who's going to be running these teams in 5 years' time. So Toronto has the most money, so that's where I'll put my bet. Has to be them.
Josh.
Yeah, I say Toronto just because of the young players that they have. And I look at Ralph Priso, Jaquil Marshall-Rutty, Ayo Akinola. These are three players that could very well be in Canada's 2026 World Cup side. So 5 years from now, whether they're still with the club, whether they've kind of moved on to bigger and better things, and then Toronto can kind of use whatever money they get from those sales to bolster their lineup. For me, it's got to be Toronto FC. They just seem to have a little bit more kind of foresight right now than the other teams.
Now, the final one before we move to Major League Soccer as a whole. This is just advice for me. I'm just going to take notes on your answers here because the four of us, we were out together in Edmonton celebrating after Canada won their matches at Commonwealth. But when you have to choose between Vancouver, Montreal, and Toronto, which city hosts the best night out, Josh?
Is it best night out 24-year-old me when I could do some damage, or best night out old man me?
How about 26?
Should be the same guy. Come on,
that's specific for me. So 26-year-old Josh.
Oh, 26-year-old Josh actually did a lot of damage in Vancouver. I lived there for a few years. And I probably can't go back for a while because of that. Vancouver is an underrated place to go out, but you know what? 26-year-old me, without the priorities and without the responsibilities that I have now, Montreal, if we're looking at kind of high end abilities in terms of going out, Montreal is the clear winner here.
Ollie.
I always feel like in Montreal that I'm like not cool enough to be there. Like it's a bit more like kind of artsy and bohemian, and I just don't fit in Montreal. So I think I would have to take Toronto, Vancouver. I've only been to Vancouver briefly, but it was very nice.
Montreal, and it's not even close. It's so easy to slip and fall and get yourself into trouble and just lose a complete weekend. So it's Montreal. It's Montreal is not even close. Come on, I can't even believe this is an actual question here.
That almost went into a different direction. Josh saying he's banned from Vancouver. Wheels talking about a weekend erased. There's going to be a time and place for those conversations.
For another show. Show.
I would say in the winter, I give it to Vancouver. In the summer, it's got to be Montreal, just to weigh in on that one. Finally, a general MLS question for the group. Oliver, give me one underrated storyline or something that MLS fans in general aren't paying enough attention to in the lead up to this season.
I'll go with one in Toronto, which I think Alejandro Pozuelo's situation is just going to be really interesting this year. I think he's a huge story for TFC that maybe people aren't talking about that much right now. And like there's multiple parts to it, right? Firstly, and most obviously, he's in a contract year. He's coming off a bad season. He wants to extend and stay in Toronto, but they don't seem to have started those talks or be really close to doing that yet. So that's going to be something that's kind of lingering there as we go into the season. And then also just how he's going to fit under Bob Bradley. Everything that I've heard from Bob Bradley in preseason and what I've been able to watch of their preseason games, I don't think he's going to get the freedom and the kind of free role that he's used to, right? He's going to be asked to be a much more specific position, playing more as a number 8, more defensive responsibility, less freedom to go and chase the ball wherever it is on the fields. And I don't know how he's going to adjust to that because he's a player in Belgium and in MLS who has always been the best player on his team and basically been allowed to do what he wants because it's worth it, right? With the way he's able to affect games. So that's something that, it could go either way. Maybe he thrives in that new role and plays really well in Bob Bradley's system. And I think that's entirely possible. Or maybe he doesn't like it so much, being a bit more restricted and having to be a bit more tactically disciplined than I think he's used to. Plus all the contract stuff on top of that.
Gareth, what are you keeping an eye on?
I don't think it's an underrated storyline. That's why I kind of feel bad in putting this out there this way. But I think it's Carlos Vela's last season in LAFC. It sounds like he's going to move on after this year. He's left the national team. Where's his ambition? I mean, he should be one of the star players in this league, and just we haven't seen the best out of him yet. They lose their manager, Bob Bradley. They bring in a lot of players at LAFC. It's such an intriguing club for me. And I want to see what they can do. And in a league that lacks some flash and dash right now, I think that LAFC brings it. So we'll see what Vela and LAFC can do this season.
Josh.
Yeah, I'll keep things in Canada. It's Alistair Johnson in Montreal. And I say that because I just wonder, is this his last season in North America, right? He moves from Nashville. And I don't know, I'm not completely sure, but my understanding is I don't know how eager Nashville were to kind of look at transferring him abroad. So I wonder, is Montreal a little bit more open to that move? And is Alistair Johnston even ready, right? I think we all agree he's a staple in the men's team, but right, is he ready for the next step in his career? What's he have to prove it's with Montreal? So that's kind of one that I'm going to be keeping an eye on.
Okay, gentlemen, the final topic of the day, a quick one, especially so people can clip this out when your bold predictions go horribly wrong and say, aha, I knew it. Bold prediction for Major League Soccer, coach getting fired, team winning MLS Cup, pitch invaders increase, anything you want. Gareth, what's your bold prediction?
Just give us your title pick. It's easy. That's what I'm going to do.
How about this? Josie Altidore scores more goals this season than Lorenzo Insigne.
You'll have a bit of a head start, but that assumes Josie stays healthy. I like it, Ollie. Where do you want to go here?
I'm going to be far more lazy than that. I'm just going to tell you who I've got for the final. Colorado over Philadelphia is my preseason pick. It's come back to me in a year.
But that's going to be a good nap I'm going to have over 90 plus minutes.
Last word to you, Mr. Cloak.
This one's not nearly as exciting, but I think with one of the highest wage bills in MLS, Atlanta United probably misses the playoffs. I just don't see the cohesion. I don't see the cohesion in the roster. I think there's just a few too many questions, a little bit too much drama for me. And I will say that I also had Toronto FC missing the playoffs last year when no one else did. So I'm doubling down in that regard.
Did you have Vancouver Whitecaps making the playoffs last year?
I did not, because I can't go. I can't talk too much about Vancouver, or else people there are going to come after me.
What a show! Every week
I got another one. Okay. Chicharito for the Golden Boot.
Chicharito for Golden Boot. Rapids Union final. Lorenzo.
I can keep going.
You could keep going. Ollie, by the way, we seem to do this every week. As for bold prediction, you go, I don't know, I haven't really thought about this, and then anyone else answers, you go, ooh, I like that. So.
I'm bad at making bold predictions, but I like hearing other people's.
Bad at bold predictions.
I don't even buy my own predictions. I just said it because it would be bold if it happened.
On OneSoccer Today, please leave a like, comment, subscribe, do all that important YouTube stuff for us. We appreciate it. We will see you tomorrow once again for OST. Cloak, Platt, Wheeler, Jenkins. Thanks so much. See you tomorrow.